This episode of Housing for Good is brought to you by listeners and supporters just like you. If you believe in creating safe, stable, and affordable housing for everyone, consider supporting the McPherson Housing Coalition. Your donation helps us provide housing solutions, support services, and hope to those who need it the most. To donate, visit our website, McPhersonHousingCoalition.org. All donations are tax deductible. Thank you.
Welcome to Housing for Good, a podcast dedicated to housing topics and issues affecting our communities in McPherson County and beyond. With years of experience and expertise, hosts Chris Goodson and Karolyn Moore discuss housing challenges and opportunities with other experts from a variety of housing fields.
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Housing for Good. I'm Karolyn.
And I'm Chris.
So, Chris, we have a really special interview today. I've been super excited about this.
Me too.
We are joined by Otis Odell.
I know. I'm really excited as well. His background, I kind of researched him just a tad, just to see what he was doing. And one of his projects actually by a place I grew up in California. So I was like, well, that's super cool. Now I want to go home and look.
I know,
and
right?
see what that looks like the next time I fly home. So anyways, well, welcome, Otis. We're so happy for you to be on our podcast today.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm really glad to be here because, as I said before, I love talking about housing and love that Vista Terrace project that's near your home base.
Yeah, we're really, that's going to be really cool to see that. So I think I'm really interested addressing trauma with housing design. What a unique idea. Karolyn and I, we're doing some permanent supportive housing. We have a non-congregate emergency shelter. But this addressing trauma with housing design, that's new for me. Is that new for you, Karolyn?
That's new, yes. And I'm really excited to hear exactly what he does. But let's start over. So, Otis, would you please introduce yourself and tell us, how did you get into this field?
Well, I decided at a very young age it was architecture. And I moved from upstate New York to Boulder, Colorado, and went to college there. And I got out of college. I framed my way through college. So I was building multifamily apartment buildings. And I got connected with an architect for about 9 years, one of my first jobs in Boulder that was a housing architect that worked for developers regularly, developer housing. And from there, had a couple of different job opportunities that came from that. And then I was in a very secure job in a large firm in downtown Denver, and I quit and opened up my own firm. So I was on a partner track and all that kind of thing. And so I had my own practice in Denver for 16 years, and I just loved housing. I've always loved housing. My practice was really focused on housing. Most of it, maybe 80% or more, was affordable housing. Then we had something called the Great Recession in 2008. And by 2009, I had been in business for 16 years, so a pretty good run. And my 16-person firm was down to 8. And so I did sell that firm to one of my employees and went off to California, where I met HED and was immediately involved in their housing sector and used my experience in affordable housing and really started to advance our housing practice in Southern California. So now I've been with HED for about 10 years. I am a principal in the firm. I've moved back to Denver, where we acquired another firm. So now we have 9 offices. We are an integrated architecture and engineering practice. We work in 9 different sectors across the country. We have education and healthcare and, of course, housing. And every sector has a national business leader. I am the national business leader for housing and mixed use for the firm.
Oh, wow.
What does HED stand for?
Harley Ellis Devereaux.
Oh, those are names.
And we were founded in 1908. in Detroit, Michigan,
Oh, wow.
and have grown over the 110 plus years, 100 and almost 20 years, to a firm of 450 people, architecture and engineering. And we've shortened everything to HED because it rolls off the tongue. Peter Devereaux was our a recent CEO. He's the only one that's still alive, as that's how he introduces himself. And he's still active in the firm. And now we have co-CEOs, one located in our Chicago office and one located in our Los Angeles office. And we are really a sector-based organization. So we work really with a sector focus. And, it's a great advantage. You start talking about trauma-informed design. We have a healthcare practice and we have a K-12 practice. So we find opportunities when we're involved in like PSH, permanent supportive housing, and where we have that resource in our healthcare group to start talking about what they see in terms of trauma.
Yeah.
It's almost, and what's happening in the world in some locations. For example, we have school districts that have surplus land and want to build teacher housing, and we collaborate with our K-12 sector. So it's a very good structure.
That's really smart the way you're doing that. People don't understand that housing is connected to everything.
Housing is connected
to everything. And that's the piece we've been missing for years. That's what we figured out. Obviously, we're nothing compared to what you guys are doing, 400 employees and all over the country. But that was the one
You're
piece.
Everything. You are all of it.
We figured out that we had to connect the dots, or this housing, building housing and tossing people in it was not going to work. So this is incredible for us to hear such an incredible model, really.
Yeah.
You can't do housing without being involved in community.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just can't. It is integral.
We have found with our emergency shelter, which we built a non-congregate emergency shelter, 2-bedroom cottages. We can immediately house a homeless family. And then the number one question is, why are you homeless? And for every situation, that's different. But you have to address those issues before you can start moving them towards permanent housing. If you don't address that stuff, it's still there and it follows them around. It's going to come back up.
So I'm really curious, what does trauma-informed design look like? Because that's a new term for me.
Yeah.
I have never heard that term before.
So, to your point, Karolyn, it's so different for every circumstance.
Oh, yeah.
It certainly is not a one-size-fits-all formulaic sort of thing. When we are involved in multifamily rental housing, we want to be really thoughtful about what kind of trauma has our resident or our residents been through. And it could be a number of things. It could be addiction. It could be getting evicted. And oh my God, I'm now on the street. What am I going to do? That's traumatic. It could be a military service issue. I mean, it could be a terrible car accident. There's just so many different kinds of things. So what you're trying to be very thoughtful about when you are designing for trauma-informed design, let's say, is just being thoughtful about how to avoid triggers that are going to not mitigate but exacerbate the trauma and the feeling. And there's just a number of things. I mean, safety and security is paramount. What does a home do in the first place? A home is a place that you feel safe and secure. And at the same time, you want it to not be institutional. Safety and security don't necessarily have to mean putting bars on the windows and fences with sharp points on the top of them and that sort of thing. I think you want to be safe and secure and have that be very visible to the resident. They know that they're safe, but they also recognize that they're not being confined or they're not being, trapped or they're not in that kind of a situation. And then
So are you saying that you want locks on the doors maybe, but yet the house needs to feel kind of homey, where you feel safe within the space, but you know you can leave if you want to as well?
I mean, yeah, that's really the key right there. I feel safe and secure in this place, and I know I can leave if I want to or need to. And that goes from, when you're talking about a multifamily development, whether it's a single building or multiple buildings, and it has its property and it has all of the things that go with it. Maybe there's outdoor space, maybe there's parking, maybe there's other things. But to understand that within that environment, you're safe and secure. And yes, it could go all the way to your unit. And some folks who have been chronically homeless don't necessarily know what to do with a set of keys, right?
Yeah.
So that can be concerning. And I think it does require, some level of case management or really understanding who your resident is. So safety and security is important. And I think clarity in the design, in other words, making it really clear what the circulation is. I don't want to get lost going down these corridors or going through this site and I don't have good visual access to what's there. So I'm not anxious, right? As I go through, as I circulate through the building or through the property, I'm not anxious about, oh my gosh, is there something around that corner? You have really good visual access and clarity around how you get from place to place. You feel better there in that kind of situation. And I am a huge believer, and I know this to be true, I'm confident that it's science-backed, and that is connection with nature and making the resident understand that there is access to the outdoors, whether it could be a balcony, there could be nice outdoor gardens, outdoor courtyards where you can, as a resident, connect with nature. It is all about well-being. And you can bring nature inside with biophilic design and getting, green walls and those kinds of things.
So it's interesting that you're talking about this, because one of the things we wanted to do with the Oak Harbor Cottages, our shelter, was to make it beautiful and have garden spaces and all these different things. They can have a cookout or they have all these areas, but I never thought of it as trauma-informed design, because I think that's what you're describing. What we did accidentally, I guess, was I just wanted it to be beautiful so that they were proud to live there and they weren't ashamed that this is where they were going. I wanted children to feel safe.
Well, and many times if you feel depressed, if there's a place where you can go outside and just be outside and see what's going on around you, take a walk in the grass, watch the birds, whatever that is, it helps reduce the stress.
Yeah. So that's really good.
That's absolutely right. You got that exactly right. Think about sitting outside and looking at the flowers or the smells and the hearing of birds, other sounds of nature. Maybe there's water. Those things are stress relievers, right? They have a relaxing effect on just about everybody. So I think the more you can create a design solution that really does impact all of your senses, visual, acoustics is another big one, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Smells, tastes, feel, all of the sensory connections, and really making sure the design has a positive impact on all of those. I think another, key feature is the acoustics, and trying to soften sound, dampen sound, particularly between units. Can you imagine if your trauma was that you were in an abusive home at some point, and all of a sudden you're hearing something across the wall that is an argument or, some sort of a confrontation? That's going to be a trigger. Yeah. So I think acoustical separation is really important in trauma-informed design. I mean, there's code-required acoustical separations. I'm also taking that a step further, thinking about how can we really make sure that there's acoustical privacy. I think, another component when we talk about trauma-informed design is giving the resident choice in terms of how they can make adjustments to their space to best suit them. Whether it is their own individual apartment, they can have operable windows, just simple stuff, right? Mm-hmm. They can have shades that they can control the sunlight. If there is a way to have lighting controls where, you want to get as much natural light in as you can, and when you are considering the lighting in the space, staying away from fluorescence, making sure that you have the ability to dim the lights and change the lighting levels to respond to your particular mood or a particular traumatic event. So really back to the impact on the senses, visual and auditory in particular, and having control, being able to move your furniture around a little bit.
What about color? Does that play a big role in all of this?
Absolutely. So calming colors, and there's more science behind that. And of course the color green comes in, but I think you want to work to avoid chaos. And so a calming color palette is really important. And soft edges, right? And not rough textures, and smoother textures, and more comfortable furnishings and that sort of thing also play into creating good feelings. Think about, I read a lot, and I'm sure you all do. What is the way to have the biggest impact on your behavior is your environment. And getting those things addressed that are calming, texture, color, lighting, noise, and controlling those in a thoughtful way is a big step in a trauma-informed design project.
So this is really pretty simplistic in a way, though. I mean, nothing here is complicated, right? I mean, you don't have to do anything that spectacular. It's just lighting and sound. And
you and I do this in our everyday life.
Yeah.
My environment makes me feel safe.
Yeah.
I feel comfortable there. I know if I'm stressed, I can go outside,
Yeah.
sit on my porch. But I think traditionally, when we're looking at housing for people,
Mm-hmm.
we're not looking at any of that.
No,
We want to know what's the quickest way to put it up,
Yeah.
what's the cheapest way to put it up.
Right.
And we don't take into consideration, like Otis has been saying, the stress or the triggers that are going to, because of your trauma, something might set you off and you may not even know exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And
so true.
You have to work through that.
Right.
What exactly in this environment is making me so anxious? And then, but if you come into this knowing that, hey, some softer lighting, make sure your color palette is good, make sure your surfaces are nice, and then maybe through working through that with the case manager, that person can kind of pinpoint what is setting them off.
And we've seen that with our kids, especially some of our kids that have experienced homelessness. They are so much calmer after they've lived in the cottages because we've done a lot of these things that he's describing, but we didn't have any idea had a name or it was. This is something that really needs to go across the nation when they're building affordable low-income housing. I mean,
I agree.
I mean, it needs to happen everywhere, and we're really involved with other groups, and we love to push this forward because we think it's, besides services, which we push as well. This is so important.
Yeah.
This design is so important. It's part of that package.
So Otis, when you're thinking of multifamily housing development, what would be the ideal development that you see? Because a lot of times when we think traditional low-income housing, we're thinking this huge apartment building, lots of different units, all brought in between four walls. And I don't think any of that is helpful or nourishing to anybody's spirit.
Yeah, that's a great question. I appreciate you thinking about that. And before I get there, I wanted to go back to one thing you said, and it's so true. And this is kind of what I'm about. You said it's basic stuff. It's simple. Mm-hmm. You use the word simple. And I find that sometimes we try to make things too complicated.
Yeah.
And it is such an important recognition. Let's control the sound. Let's make sure we can control the light. Let's make sure that there's a connection to the outdoors. Pretty simple stuff. Mm-hmm. Doesn't necessarily have to cost a lot of money. You have to be thoughtful about it. So back to your question about what's the ideal thing. And, I've given a lot of thought to this lately about the experience of walking down what we call a double loaded corridor, right? You're walking down a corridor, there's doors on both mm-hmm. sides. And I've been giving a lot of thought to this idea about the space between the spaces. So what is the experience going down the corridor if that's what the developer is insistent upon doing because it's very efficient mm-hmm. And that sort of thing? So if that's going to be the basic solution, we got to find a way to get a break, to get a window or multiple windows into the corridor so that there's light coming in, maybe even a little window seat or bench or place to stop and read and look out and connect. And it helps with wayfinding when you do that. It helps you orient yourself. I can see outside, I can see the sun over there, or I can see that tree that I see and I know where I am relative to the rest of the earth, right? Mm-hmm. I think those kinds of things are important. The other thing I've been thinking about is walking down this corridor and getting to my door, or do I want to have my own door that goes to the outside?
That's exactly what I was thinking just now. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what I would want.
So I was looking at a development yesterday, and it was small, relatively small, 56 units. It was workforce. It was for teachers. And they had what's called a walk-up, right? You're probably familiar with walk-up. So it's units on the ground floor and then units that are stacked on top. Maybe it's 2 stories, maybe it's 3 stories. And then there's this central stair that you can walk up and you can access 2, 3, or 4 units at every level. So now you've got a situation where you can be outside and not walking down that corridor and walking directly into your own front door. I think that, there are some populations that might really appreciate that, and there might be others that are a little concerned about that. Back to the original comments about security and safety. Mm-hmm. How can that happen in that kind of a design solution? So I think you have to evaluate what that really means. And I think, you're in a unique situation where you've got a population that you serve in multiple locations. And I was looking at your website a bit, and it looked like you've got a couple things. You've got tiny homes where mm-hmm. everybody's got their own front door. Mm-hmm. It looked like you had other developments where everybody's got their own front door. And I didn't know I'm not sure I saw any big, behemoth multifamily buildings. So I think, when you get to the big metropolitan areas and homelessness has numbers that are just unbelievable. In Los Angeles County, there's 69,000 people that are homeless, and 40-50% of those are sleeping under the stars every night. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes density is called for. So if you're in that kind of an environment and you are addressing density, back to some of the tenets that we've talked about. really clear circulation paths. Don't get me into a dead-end corridor. Get some window and light into the corridor, whether it's at the end or at certain points along the way. And create a design that encourages socialization. Because I think socialization is a huge part of trauma-informed design. You want to be able to have spaces that you can go to that are places where there can be group activities. That's going to work for some populations. Others might want to sit around the edge of that space and tucked away a little bit and observe what's happening there. And so I think you've got to have that kind of flexibility in the spaces that you're designing. And of course, we're all constrained by budgets. So now you want to get into a room or a space that has the ability to be subdivided or cordoned off, whether it's movable partitions or furniture, other ways that you can sort of create multiple functions in a space. And you need a big closet, so that you can store, different kinds of chairs and tables, and so you can do different kinds of events. And again, goes back to letting the residents have some choices and some autonomy about how they want to interact. And, you very likely are going to want to include, counseling spaces, case manager spaces where you can have one-on-one or, a counselor meeting with a family, for example. And so those kinds of spaces, whether you can use movable partitions to cordon off a space and have the ability to do that, or you dedicate a couple of rooms that allow you to meet with your residents and have counseling so that you can get into the psychological issues of trauma-informed design. So socialization's really important. And it's interesting, you talked about veterans. Veterans seem to want to some can be really loners, and others like to be in groups, and they want to be in a group of folks that's just like them. Yeah. So they want to be with other veterans, right? They want to be in that kind of a setting. So creating those kinds of spaces that allow that socialization, particularly if you're in a more dense, kind of a bigger building with central loaded corridors. And I look for ways to break it down. I mean, again, every situation is different, so it depends. And it depends on what kind of a community you're in. Are you going to go with a 5-story building? Or are you going to go with a 2-story building or cottages, as you guys have done? And I think those kinds of things, and that takes you back to community.
So the other thing I'm hearing you say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I'm hearing you say
please.
Flexibility. So a lot of what's going on here is you can't have these black and white rules and things in place. I mean, obviously you have to do that for safety, but we need to be flexible with each one of our families depending on, we always looked at their trauma and tried to work around their trauma to figure out how we can help them through that. But flexibility is huge.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm hearing with what you're talking about is being flexible with your spaces and making sure that each person has the things that they need to feel safe and like this is their home.
Well, and I think so many times, in Wichita, they have been having this conversation and they eventually were able to buy an old school building for $1. So they're really not taking into consideration the people they're going to house there. They're looking at, well, there's this big building and we're going to put all these people in there. The problem they're finding is people don't want to be in there because of the very things that Otis is talking about, where there's corridors and I can't see and I don't see the outside and I don't feel safe. And, so people have to change the way they're thinking when you're providing housing, especially for folks in trauma.
Yeah.
Agreed. You've hit it right on the head. And I think this idea of flexibility, and don't let flexibility be an excuse for not making up your mind, right?
Yeah.
So be deliberate about flexibility. I'm going to need to be able to create this kind of an environment. I'm going to need to be able to create this other type of environment. And so be intentional about it and design it so that you can accommodate those things. And then, of course, there's always the thing you didn't think about. So,
of course.
Right. And, we do these community rooms in affordable housing developments, and nobody's thinking about the acoustics. Nobody's thinking about a speaker coming in, or a teacher coming in, or even an event where, it's like a classroom style event. So acoustics are important. And back to what we talked about earlier on managing, the sound and making it clear and that sort of thing. And the ability to, it's, again, nice to be connected to the outside and be able to see outside. And then in some instances, it might be just fine to have window treatments that can black it out. So you don't feel like you're in a fishbowl in certain environments. So that flexibility component, Chris is right on, really important. And Karolyn, to your point, when you are able to buy a building for $1, what a great opportunity. And you're halfway there because you've got a structure and you got a roof over your head. Let's not forget to address the other issues about connection to the outside and how you deal with the space between the spaces and how you create opportunities for socialization. And I also think that many communities have higher populations of a certain culture.
Yeah.
And I think understanding how to be able to insert the cultural component into a building, into its texture, its fabric, its fragrance, is something to really think about. I think about I think about accessories, right? Accessories. You got a common space and it feels like a living room. Let's not make it feel institutional.
Yeah.
Let's make it feel like home. Let's put, a piece of sculpture on the table that's calming. Let's get a nice landscape or a painting or a photograph or something that, again, is a calming thing that starts to help define the space a little bit.
So,
accessories.
We really are raising funds right now to put some artwork on our cottage, where our cottages are, that is very child friendly. So it was funny that you brought that up, because that was a piece and somebody's like, why do you want to put art there? I said, because I want it to be beautiful and calming, and I want kids to feel like, wow. I mean, that just matters a lot. So all these things that we've been really, it's just mind-boggling that we accidentally bumped into all of this. But we did for them what we would do for ourselves. We wanted to make sure, I want to feel that way in my home. I'm a big gardener. I want to make sure flowers make me feel happy, and I like digging in the dirt. I like certain colors, and even in the office, we try to decorate and things. So it's really very simple, isn't it?
Well, and the population that is caught in the trauma that they have no control over is the children. And so we have always tried to focus on, you have to stop the trauma with the children so that we can raise adjusted adults and kind of get past some of that. I know stuff happens to everybody, but the more we can do to help the kids grow up trauma-free or to work through the trauma, the better they're going to be as adults and the better the world will be. So, Otis, one more question here. How do you see this movement evolving in the next 5 to 10 years? So you said you're in 9 spaces, 9 cities?
Our firm does have 9 offices across the country, and we work in 9 different sectors in our architectural practice, both,
Okay. So how do you see this evolving? Like, are you getting more interest from other folks around the country to know what you're doing and how's it working and how do we do it?
Yeah, I'm ready for you to come to McPherson, Kansas right now, quite honestly.
Really? Yeah, me too.
I'll be there. I'd love to get
I would,
a tour of what
I
you
would
guys are doing.
love that.
I can, I there's so much I could learn from you all in terms of what you're doing. I love that, what you're doing is so aligned with some of the things that, we're talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
And it is because of how you're thinking. The future, I mean, if I had to answer to that question, I don't know where I would be. The hope is that there's, to your point, we can raise children in a trauma-free environment and raise children into adults that are productive and confident and lack anxiety and stress. I mean, that's the goal. Mm-hmm. And I think we should always keep that in our sights in terms of what the future holds. I mean, I've been around a few decades. I have not, and I grew up in a very simple life in a farm in upstate New York, and I'm so grateful for that. I have to tell you, the world is so different. Mm-hmm. COVID, we've been through COVID. We had a national pandemic. You think that stressed some people out. Yeah. People, a million people died, and they were mothers and brothers and sisters and and grandparents and aunts and uncles. It's traumatic. Phones are a part of every teenager's hand, and it causes stress and anxiety. They're constantly comparing themselves to others. I fear that we have to continue our work to address trauma-informed design. Mm-hmm. I wish it wasn't the case. And I hope that everybody can be a part of doing exactly what you guys are doing, starting with boots on the ground at the grassroots level and making sure our children are in places where they feel safe and comfortable and not threatened, and they can enjoy artwork on the walls, and they can enjoy gardening and getting outside. And I think if that can happen over and over and over again, we may get to a point where, the future feels a little bit better. In the meantime, I think we've got to keep going with what we're dealing with here, because I think trauma and anxiety and stress may have never been as high as it is now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Given all the things that we go through.
Yeah.
Thank you for being on our podcast, Otis. This has been so good.
I know.
I could talk to you for days, but, I don't think that will be allowed. But
wow. I told you that you had to shut me up sometimes because I love talking about housing. You have my contact information, I think, or you know where to find me at HED. Yeah. Honest to God, I mean, where's McPherson?
Right in the middle of the center of Kansas.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wichita, Kansas. We're about 45 miles north of Wichita, Kansas. Yep.
Who knows? Maybe there's an opportunity for us to connect one way or the other.
We would love that.
Anything's possible.
Yeah, we would absolutely love that.
Well, Otis, we thank you so much for joining us today. If you would like to leave us a review, you can do that at housingforgood@mcphersonhc.org. Thank you for listening. Stay tuned for the next one and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.